Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good day, Molweni, Khuyamorok, wherever you are. Alhamdulillah, I hope you are well with the qudrat of the Almighty, with the blessings of your surroundings, appreciative of what we have. I'm Gouwah Soloman, and welcome you to another show of Parenting Today. In our different ad hoc studio here in Cape Town, the beautiful mother city, we welcome some of our Cape Town guests and professionals in our Parenting Today studio. And as always, our intention is hopefully to raise our children with the best of the ummah can reap the benefit from that. And ultimately, they're not ours. They're just borrowed for a little while. And through the time that we have them, may we give them the sort of education, love, comfort, teachings, and hopefully the role model how we really want them to be, not just for us, for the greater good, inshallah. But today we talk about child safety. Accidents at home, in the car, in the water, out at the park, everywhere we go. Children are involved in accidents. This little body, this little person that we've been given as an amana to protect, to love, to care for, to teach, today's, we need to protect them in a physical way as well. In studio, we welcome our specialist pediatrician based out here in Cape Town, the Western Cape, at the Red Cross Children War Memorial Hospital. Specialist pediatrician Dr Zureida Khan Allie is a Mukaddam Sabri. Assalamu alaikum to you, to our studios here in Cape Town, mashallah. It's so good to meet you finally, and welcome to our studios.
Wa alaikum salam, Gouwah. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today.
Mashallah. Hope all our parents, educators, community members, our gogos, our grannies, our mamas, our nannies will benefit from a show like this,
inshallah,
so we can ultimately protect our children. Ameen, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So, Dr. Zureida, firstly, as an introduction, you're currently working with adolescents at the within the adolescent space at the Children's Hospital. You've been doing this specialist pediatrician for the past 12 years, alhamdulillah. You've seen children in and out with various conditions, and today we focus on accidents and how we can possibly prevent them.
Absolutely.
Talk to us firstly about some of the trauma that's seen through an accident at the emergency hospital and seen on a daily basis at the hospital.
SubhanAllah, certainly. So, with the advent of the school holidays, this is actually prime time for accidents in children.
Yeah.
As I said to you earlier, before the show, when the schools close, then the stress levels of all the staff at Red Cross rises as everybody else goes into relaxed mode. Because we know this is the time of year that children are at home, often unsupervised, often unattended. And so it is a time when we definitely see an upsurge in the number of trauma and accidents that come in. So common things that we see are seasonal.
Okay.
So, in the winter, in the June holidays, we would typically be seeing a lot of burn injuries that come in. But usually at the summer holidays, we see a lot of pedestrian vehicle accidents.
Okay.
Children are out, children are on the road. They are not safe in traffic. And so they can come in actually as victims of pedestrian vehicle accidents. And then we often also see children coming in as a result of being passengers in cars that have been involved in accidents. And obviously a lot of that can be related to the drunken driving and the increased alcohol consumption that typically happens at this time of the year. So it's actually almost, I would say, it's a very risky time for children to be out and about. So apart from, motor car accidents, we see drownings in summer. Unfortunately, families have a lot of time off. They want to go to the beach. They are at the pool. And it's a fun time. And it's meant to be. After a long year of work, I think the December holidays offer us a time to reconnect with our family, reconnect with our friends. And so it's not uncommon that we want to be out but sometimes a lot of those expeditions can end, with an unfortunate presentation to the emergency unit. So we do tend to see drownings, more commonly in summer. And then another common thing that we see in the summer months is paraffin ingestion. Okay. Paraffin is stored in various containers because within the township settings, paraffin is very much still sold in the drum. And so you can literally go to paraffin with an empty orange juice bottle and you can buy 5 rands worth of paraffin. And so that bottle of paraffin would be stored in the kitchen, and the child is thirsty, and they come by and they think it's water. So they will drink that paraffin, you know. So it's your ingestions, it's drownings, it's pedestrian vehicle accidents. And then unfortunately, we're also seeing a large number of personal violence actually. So accidents as a result of direct trauma inflicted upon child to child or parent to child. So those are, you know, unfortunately, sadly, some of the common things that we see.
Okay. Are there any social accidents or occurrences that does happen that children should not be involved in, possibly exposed to certain things, and not physical accidents as we would commonly know them as?
Absolutely. So, you know, a topic that has really piqued my interest and something that has come to the fore for us as pediatricians is the online exposure that we are seeing. And whilst it may be surprising to the audience to consider this as an accident, I can't help but think that it is an accident. And what I mean by this is obviously the inadvertent exposure of a young child, a young mind inadvertently exposed to pornography online. It has devastating consequences on a child's development and developmental trajectory from that point on. And it's, you know, it's really something that, yes, I'll often hear the parents say it was accidental. Being online is never accidental.
Yeah, nobody puts their child in front of
you know, we make a choice to give our children access to a computer and to a laptop and to a cell phone. But I think when we make those decisions, we actually need to be so conscious of what world we are opening them up to.
Very correctly said. So now to get to some of the accidents that commonly happens at home.
Yes.
We have the bites, the scrapes, the possible drownings. We have poison, as you mentioned, they do happen at home. Let's talk around how, if you could mention them firstly, and how we can possibly prevent them.
Certainly. So, I mean, again, summer, the weather is great, so there are lots of bees in the garden, you know, and children love being out in the garden. And if you are lucky enough to have a garden that's got beautiful flowers, you obviously are going to be attracting bees in. So, unfortunately, bee stings, there's a range of reactions that could happen. So, you can have a child who's actually so allergic to bee stings that they could present with an acute anaphylactic reaction to it. And how you would recognize that was if your child was stung by a bee, or often multiple bees, because usually where there's one bee, there are many. So sometimes you can actually have a case where a child may be stung by more than one bee. And the most serious of that would be recognizing if your child is actually having an allergic reaction to the bee sting, so-called anaphylaxis. So if following the bee sting, the child suddenly presents with difficulty breathing, or has suddenly lost a lot of color from their face, which would imply that their blood pressure has dropped precipitously, or they just seem very weak and very faint. There's no other treatment for that but an urgent and immediate administration of intramuscular adrenaline. So that's the case. You jump in your car and you head for the emergency room. On a milder note, you could have a child that has a bee sting, has a mild allergic reaction, and so obviously they could end up with a bit of local tenderness around the site of that bee sting. We usually recommend that you just clean the area with an antiseptic. Sometimes the bee leaves its little sting in there, and if you are able, and you can take a little tweezer and remove that. But I think for most mummies, they are so often so traumatized by it, they would probably pop down to their GP anyway. And it's never a bad idea. The truth is, you are never going to know that your child is allergic to a bee sting until a bee stings them.
That's so true.
That is,
you never know. You don't have that EpiPen at home with you.
No,
if it's
absolutely.
Happen, so
absolutely.
Until it happens.
So I think being aware of the serious spectrum, the serious end of that spectrum is important, because then it would encourage our mothers and fathers to seek the appropriate help before it actually, because anaphylaxis we know can be deadly. If it's not treated rapidly, it can actually result in death.
So bee stings is one of the common things that happens at home, and probably on holiday. I want to hopefully help moms to just carry some sort of emergency first aid kit, which is at home or in the car, because now most people are traveling. But we're going to quickly take a short break, and when we come back, we'll run through some of the guidelines where Dr. Zakira will help us, a specialist pediatrician, guide us through some of the important pros and cons of carrying some of the first aid kits, how to prevent, of course, and then how to deal with it through our show. But before we continue this topic, let's check out our parenting tip on accidents this week. Take a listen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is Parenting Today. Please do follow us on our various social media pages, and anyone listening or watching rather right now and they want maybe a family or friend or possible colleague to watch, whether they are in SA or Africa or America or Saudi or Australia, anywhere around the world, they can do so on www right now. Log on Hilaal.tv and live stream. Let's continue the show with Dr. Zureida. We're chatting about accidents, and you've gone through just some, and I'm sure there's many, and new pops up from time to time, but those are the most common accidents that we could see. The video showed some interesting ways of helping moms and parents to just keep things safe. And often you've mentioned the paraffin in the orange bottle, putting the stuff high up on the counter. We say, yes, we're going to do it, but things do happen.
Absolutely.
So take us through some of the preventative methods that we can have at home, and then we'll deal with once the bee sting or what is drunk and what has happened, that scald and that burn, how we can prevent it and deal with it. But firstly, let's look at prevention. Inshallah.
Certainly. So I like to approach this in a way that you're taking a walk through your house.
Okay.
So if you start at the front door, and you're obviously going to enter into your lounge area. All right. So you kind of take a look at your lounge and look at the space. And often this is the time of year where you have lots of people visiting. So you may not have young children, but your friends may have little children or toddlers that could come in. So take a quick look around your lounge and look at things that could potentially cause or be a hazard to a toddler who's curious and who's going to be inquisitive and climb into something. So, we all have these ornaments. I look at this little thing on this table, for example. It's got these little loose pebbles. So you often have people have these ornamental marbles and stones in little jars and jugs, right? All it takes is for a little toddler to grab one of those and to ingest it, and they can choke. All right? It's a simple, preventable thing. It can save you a lot of trouble and definitely a visit from. So if you have friends coming over and you have things like that, put it onto a higher shelf where a little toddler may not be able to reach it. Similarly, lots of glass vases around in your lounge or glassware, anything that can fall, shatter, and potentially cause cuts that can be actually quite devastating. And remember, as glass shatters, there's always the risk that the segments of glass can end up in a child's eye. So it's a simply, easily preventable thing. We all love to have a house that looks nice, but you rather have a house that's child safe. So put away all the potentially traumatic items that you can see. Another thing within the lounge itself, it's an off chance that it could happen. But flat screen televisions, for example, they are light. And all it can take is for a little toddler to pull onto one, and she can pull that whole television onto herself. So TVs should be stuck against the wall, where a toddler is not going to stand. There's no possibility that thing can actually fall down and fall on top of them. Similarly, a cabinet. Toddlers love climbing up. But imagine a little 10-kilogrammer climbing up on this thing and pulling it onto themselves. The weight of that cabinet landing onto a toddler's body, it can actually cause quite severe damage, Again, carpets, rugs. Our kids are often playing in the lounge area, so any toys that could be lying around, anything that they could put into their mouth. Remember, that's the age of exploration.
Everything goes to the mouth.
Everything. That's how they're learning. They learn, they put things, they touch, they feel. So anything that they could potentially choke on, pack it away, pack it out of sight. All right? Cords, for example. You don't want long cords lying around. Children have an uncanny way of entangling themselves in these things. They can actually strangulate themselves with it, as odd as it sounds. But we have seen this. It can happen. Now you move from your lounge and you move into your kitchen area. Common site of household accidents. And I always say in the kitchen, we really need to be very, very mindful. Often when we are cooking, the kids are around us and they want our attention and they buy your legs, etc., etc. So if you've got hot pots on the stove, for example, put your stoves on if you are able to use the back burners if possible. But if you need to engage all 4 burners, make sure the handles of your pot are turned inward so that a toddler cannot reach up and pull onto one. The cords of the kettle, very common cause of burn injuries. A child will come, doesn't realize that kettle has been filled and boiled, tugs on that, and devastating, full hot water burns. Commonly, you will find parents will sit with a cup of hot tea and they will have their toddler on their lap. and it just causes my anxiety to rise. So you rather choose, spend a moment of quality time with your little one, put them down, and then have your tea. It takes a minute for a cup of hot coffee to spill onto a child's face.
And notice that when you put it on the table, they tend to pull
they will pull that down as well. Absolutely. You know, so, I mean, the children are designed to be curious. And accidents happen because of curiosity.
And we need just to be aware of this.
You know, so it's just trying to look at your space and make it as safe as possible. Then another thing, obviously, within the kitchen space, we tend to store, many of us, we store our detergents maybe in that cupboard under the sink.
Yes.
If it's at all possible, I always recommend to my patients to try and have a lock on that door. Because that's the cupboard where the jig is going to be, the bleach and other detergents that if a child ingests can have long-term effects on them. All right. So we also encourage, I mean, nowadays a lot of people buy bulk detergents. And as a result of the bulk detergents, they will often decant into smaller clear containers. And if you look,
cool drink bottles.
Yes, if you look at the color of, for example, simple dishwashing liquid, it's beautiful, it's green, and it's bright.
Yummy.
And a toddler doesn't know that that is actually meant to wash dishes and would think nothing of actually picking up that bottle and taking a slug of it. All right? A common fabric softeners, it looks like slushy. So what's going to stop them from swigging down a little bit of fabric softener? So, you know, keeping a lock on your detergent door, if not, to have your detergent cupboard up above your sink, if possible, in a cupboard where they actually cannot get to. That said, the best of toddlers have ways and means of scrambling up onto countertops and can actually open cupboards and do what they need to do.
I saw my cat even jumping on my door handle.
Correct.
Opening my door.
Correct.
So if the cat can do it, just crawling on all fours.
Absolutely.
So another thing I found helpful in the kitchen was my mom used to say, make one cupboard that they know they can go to.
Correct.
So if it's where your plastics is, say, okay, open that cupboard, for instance, and that attracts their attention and they'll just be busy there.
Absolutely.
And they know that's the cupboard to go to.
For sure. Another thing that we commonly do, many households, you tend to keep your medicines in your kitchen because you want it at hand, right? So there's often a well thought out kitchen cupboard where medicines are stored. Not a good idea if you have toddlers or young children, all right? Young children will very quickly make the association that there's medicine there, and if I'm sick, I can take something. So it's nothing will stop them actually from climbing up there one day when mom's not around, their tummy is aching, and they'll go and they'll grab something, and unbeknownst to them.
These are not toddlers.
No,
I mean, these are
children.
Grades 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely, even older. You know, they will say, well, I had a stomach pain or my head was sore, and then I've taken something.
This looks like the bottle that my mom gave me the last time.
Taken something inadvertently that was potentially toxic to them. So ingestions are so preventable. And I always say to parents, look for the childproof lock. Childproof locks are actually difficult. If you can struggle to open it, then that's the best one. That's the one that you want to get. And often when there are grandparents who are living in the house, I mean, and this is a common scenario, alhamdulillah, within our community, grandparents will sit at the breakfast table or the lunch table and they will take out their diabetic meds and they may put it on the table and then they may forget to take it. And so that diabetic meds ends up on the table or fallen down onto the floor. Your toddler crawls in, looks at it, says, oh, sweetie. He will pick it up
in the mouth.
And 3 hours later, he has a low blood sugar. He's unconscious and nobody knows why. And later on, when we do the inquiry, we say, oh, well, there's a diabetic grandparent in the house.
Not knowing how that happens.
Probably ingested the medication and this is what's led to. So again, preventable. And always say, you know, when these cases come in, Hawa, it's so important for us as the doctors, you know, to not point because those parents already come in feeling so guilty that this accident has happened, you know, and I think just projecting compassion in that space is critical. And this is why I tend to stress prevention.
Absolutely.
You know, so then, I mean, moving from your kitchen, obviously, into your bedroom. The bedroom also poses risks to children in terms of accidents. And what do I mean by that? We often have double bunks, right? Double bunks, oh my word. The number of children that fall off the top of double bunks and fracture their arms, and it's just crazy. So if you do decide to put a double bunk, most kids love it. You need to teach them to be safe No one jumps off the top. No one pushes each other off the top because it's often in play.
Boys, they play.
It's often during play that injuries of that nature happen. Blankets, which can pose a suffocation and a strangulation risk to small babies, especially little toddlers and little babies under the age of 1. I always tell the parents, we have a saying, babies should be put on their backs to sleep. Okay. All right? It's safer for a baby under the age of 1 to be laid down to sleep on their back. And why do we say that? Because if they are on their tummies, and if for some reason, maybe they have a vomit, for example, especially little babies who have not yet mastered head control, they are unable to roll over, they can suffocate, and they can actually die as a result of that. And then we also know that we've seen a higher incidence in cot deaths in babies who are put on their tummies to sleep. Okay. So to prevent it, we as pediatricians recommend that small babies under the age of 4 months should be put on their backs to sleep. I generally push it even up to a year. And ideally, when you're tucking your kids in, it's so tempting to put them in the duvet. Please don't do that. Put their blankets here under their chin. Okay. All right. And if you can, even arms above. All right. So that there's no risk of blankets coming into their faces and causing them to suffocate.
And that's not even something that we touched on with regards to babies and possible accidents that could happen with them.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing to add on as well. Preventive methods, we're still chatting about it. And I think we can have a whole show just on it, but we need to go and pay the bills quickly with Dr. Zureida, specialist pediatrician in studio, as we talk child safety and accidents around the home, on holiday, on the road, even in your car. So lots more still to chat about. Don't forget to interact with us on our various social pages. We also want to hear by you. Where you going on the holidays and how we can help you keep your child safe. But more just after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. Good day. This is Parenting Today. And thank you so much for staying with us as we take you through some helpful hints and tips to keep your child safe around your home, in your car, and on holiday. It's the silly season. We all want to enjoy ourselves. The children does as well. And as parents, we can be a bit overwhelmed when something does happen to our child, a little bit of an accident, but rather be safe than sorry. So Dr. Zureida in studio, our pediatrician, taking us through being in the public sector and seeing many traumas at the hospital, and now we're talking about how we can possibly prevent it, inshallah, with lots of du'as. So we're in the bedroom, we're moving to the bathroom, and then of course we have to go outside. What preventative measures? I know, like I said, we can do the show on and on.
Absolutely.
But we want to look at also helping moms when things do happen.
So bathroom safety, I think the most important thing is that children who are not able yet to bath themselves should never be left unattended. In a bathroom. All right. It literally takes an inch of water for a child to drown. And we know that children drown quietly. They don't cry out. They are unable to call for help. And so it literally happens in a flash. So bathroom safety, I cannot stress enough. If you have a bathtub, don't ever leave your child unattended in a bathtub. Absolutely. All right. It's of critical importance. Loose bath rugs, notorious. Children are often running and they're in a hurry and they can slip and hit their chins against the shower edge, against the tiles, and we often see them coming with lacerated chins and lacerated foreheads, and you just wouldn't believe the things that can happen.
I've seen it.
And then obviously the bathroom cabinet is also a source of possible ingestions because of all the things that we keep within our bathroom cabinets. So just make sure, make sure that, whatever you've chosen to put within the bathroom space, that it is in a childproof container, or better still, not in a space where your child actually is going to have access to it.
Going outside, we could have a little bit of rubble. We could have, some accumulation of old building material.
For sure.
Some garden tools even. Let's guide us through that.
Definitely. So obviously all and any sharp objects that the child may have access to poses a risk to them. All right. Children have really interesting ways of injuring themselves. And sometimes the stories you hear is just unbelievable. All right. So power tools should definitely be stored out of reach of children. Children think it's easy because they've seen dad busy grinding away and they think it's easy, but literally. So, unplug them, pack them away so that a child does not have access to them. Your simple garden tools, spades, rakes, all of those, if they fall, they're riding a bicycle, they trip trip over something, they land against the spade, it can cause a terrible cut, it can cause terrible injury to their physical selves. So I would say that in simple terms, anything that could hurt an adult can definitely hurt a child. So you're going to pack things out of sight, out of mind, put it in a place where it's safe and you know that it's not going to pose a risk to your child. Within, like you mentioned earlier, especially when we're doing renovations at home, there's lots of loose pieces of maybe glass or from the building. That's all risky for our children. So if you can clear rubble away as quickly as it accumulates, don't allow it actually, to pile up. I mean, we've had some devastating cases in the past where people have done renovations, for example, and they have taken out an old chest freezer and they just haven't gotten around to getting rid of that chest freezer, or even just a freezer, for example, or a fridge. And children are playing games.
Oh my goodness.
And they climb into that box. And if that box closes on them, or if the door of the fridge closes on them, absolutely devastating consequences, So it's literally, I think, Gouwah, it is just about almost like with a critical acumen, looking at your space and asking yourself regularly, how safe is the space for my child? Many of us are living in a house where there may be a balcony.
Yes.
So is your balcony safe? Does your balcony have railings that the child can put their head
or
through?
Or burglar bars even when you...
Exactly, Or the windows of a top floor of a house. Are there bars? Is there a potential that a child could wiggle his body through there?
I actually found my daughter, I found my 3-year-old daughter also outside while the gate was on.
Yes.
And I thought, how did you get out there?
Exactly.
And I got the shock of my life. And we immediately, of course, put stuff in.
Absolutely.
Not realizing that she was getting...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and then another common injury that we've seen, and I mean, I shudder to think about it. We all are operating automated garage doors and automated garden gates. And literally, it takes a split second. You are pulling in your car, your child is excited, hasn't seen you the whole day, and you don't realize that the child is actually running out of the house and toward the garage, and the garage door comes down and the child can be trapped under it. It's just like, it sounds almost unbelievable, but I would not actually say it unless we've seen it.
I've heard even in Skapral, where the plots are big, the children are running around, the grandfather reversed and he knocked the child.
Absolutely.
Not seeing it behind him.
Absolutely. So, even there, if you're leaving the house in the morning, as the parent, the kids are on holiday, shout out to them, I'm leaving now, so that other adults who may be in the house or older children may be aware. And so keep the little ones sort of at bay so that they don't go bouncing out into the driveway where they could potentially be knocked down.
Absolutely.
Accidentally. And then your common bicycle accidents and the skateboarding accidents. This is it.
It just goes on and on.
It just goes on and on.
Just to be completely aware. So looking at some of the common things that often happens in the homes, the insect bites, the sun as well is another accident, burns it's away. How can, and what is sort of before we take the break, if we can just go through some of the lists to have as an emergency first aid kit at home and in our car.
For sure.
Before we treat anything.
I think that you bring up an absolutely critical point. No home should be without a first aid kit.
Okay.
In that moment, you need to know where it is and you need to know what's in there. So I always suggest that we need to have things on hand to, to administer for the acute emergency. So it needs to have obviously a good antiseptic. So something, I don't know if I'm allowed to say brand names, but I'll rather just say an antiseptic, an astringent antiseptic that you can clean up a wound with. You probably need to have some gauze so you can stop bleeding. So in other words, where children cut themselves or unfortunately, there's the cut and they're bleeding quite profusely. So you need to have some gauze that you can wrap with a bandage just to put some pressure on to control until you can get more definitive treatment. All right. I always recommend that people have in their first aid kit in the car, for example, especially when we're going on a long road, you need to have some rehydrate in that or any kind of rehydrating solution because it it always happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been on the long road. Often, one of your kids is going to have the diarrhea and vomiting on that trip. And if you haven't come prepared, you can end up with a really sick, dehydrated child by the end of that journey.
That holiday
right?
at all, yeah.
So, to keep a sachet of rehydrating solution that you can mix up with some water, and obviously just give the child to sip on until you can get more definitive treatment. Some antipyretic agents, some agent to control fever is always important. Mercurochrome, good old red medicine, monkey blood, as the kids are know it at school. It's a good standalone. And often if you have a minor sort of injury, a minor cut, it does speed up the healing of it. So it's good to have within your first aid kit. I think, just generally your antiseptic, a skin calming solution for sunburn is useful to have within that. And then obviously there's a list of medication that I think a first aid kit should contain. And I'm not sure if this is the correct platform, but I mean, you need something for fever, you need something for vomiting, you need something for diarrhea, you need some allergy medicine, some allergics. But like I say, one needs to be careful with allergy because often it can become worse. So when you think a child,
antihistamine,
yes, an antihistamine. So if a child is having an allergic reaction, I would probably say if it's the first time, stop at the pharmacy and just get a second opinion, or a doctor if you are able to.
All right. Let's take a short break. When we come back, inshallah, thank you so much to Dr. Zakira giving us some guidelines. How can we prevent them? What we need to have in our homes? And after the next short break, we'll quickly tell you what you can do when your accidents does possibly happen at home. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Parenting Today. A big thank you, shukr to Dr. Zakira Sableh, specialist pediatrician who's been doing this for the past 12 years and finds a space in the adolescent space right now at the Red Cross Children's War Memorial Hospital based out here in Cape Town, the Western Cape, the biggest children's hospital in Africa. We appreciate her expertise on the show on accidents, how to prevent it, guiding us in the different types of accidents that could possibly happen at home and what she's seeing at hospitals as well. It is our responsibility to take care of our kids, to keep them safe, mentally, socially, psychologically, emotionally, and yes, as discussed, we can and must make a stance when it comes to their physical harm. So accidents can be prevented. You and I need to make a difference. And to help us aid through that, knowing what to do when accidents do happen, let's take a look at this very informative video.
In this video, you will learn some simple steps to take to prevent everyday accidents. Keep household cleaning products high up or in a locked cupboard. Do not put toxic products into bottles intended for foodstuffs. Keep all medication together in a secure place, out of reach of children. The best answer is a locked medicine cabinet. Do not leave windows open and unattended. If you have a balcony, make sure that your child's head cannot fit through the bars. If so, use another barrier. Prevent access to stairs by using a stair gate. Do not leave electrical cables trailing on the floor. Don't leave small objects lying around that could be swallowed by young children. To avoid burns, turn pan handles towards the wall. Keep lighters and matches away from children, and use a fire guard in front of a fireplace. Always unplug the iron after use. Never leave an extension lead plugged in when it is not in use. Use plug socket safety covers. Always ensure that the temperature of bathwater and of food is not too hot. To avoid drowning, never leave a child unsupervised in the bath. even if the water is very shallow. Never leave a child alone near the sea or at the edge of a pool. If you have a swimming pool, you must install a fence of sufficient height or an approved surveillance system. Always explain the potential risks to your children.
Yes, I hope that video helped you out a little bit. All the first aid kits, prevention, and also first aid for children. Let's sit your child down if they possibly happen to have an accident or something that had happened, how they know how to deal with it. The older ones hopefully help the younger ones, and the younger ones there to assist the older ones. And when parents are around, please, in emergency cases, do take their child when it's severe burns, when there's a real emergency case. Keep those emergency numbers at hand as well, and don't forget that emergency first aid kit in your car when you're traveling. Accidents are happening on the road. Please, no sitting on the laps, moms, when you're breastfeeding. Breastfeed, finish, and then take the long trip. Keep that first aid kit at home as well as in the car. And as Dr. Zureida mentioned, maybe you should move your medicine cabinet to somewhere else than the kitchen, maybe in your bathroom or high up where only you know where it is, for emergencies only. Remember, keep those emergency numbers handy, yours, your husband's, your family, close contact, your neighbors as well, if you're in a big plot, your extra neighbors, and sit your kids down to be safe this holiday silly season. Hope you enjoys this edition of First Aid for your kids and you, preventing accidents at home and child safety. Be safe, be well, look after yourself, and do enjoy this festive season. From myself, Gouwah Soloman, for now on Parenting Today. Wassalamu alaikum and goodbye.